for being willing to talk to us this morning. I wanted to start talking about your upcoming album and just get your thoughts on the meaning behind the title and the cover art that you chose for this project.
Yeah, so I'm trying to, it's like a Reader's Digest version because there's so much to talk about. When everything kind of happened with the pandemic, and of course everyone's lives were just completely interrupted, I remember just going, oh, I can't wait to get through this. I can't wait to get through this, which we're still trying to get through it. And it's not even a bad thing to say, you know what I mean? But I just had this feeling like, I can't wait to get through this. And God really kind of spoke to my heart in a very clear way. And I don't say that kind of flippantly because I know it's a very bold statement to say. But he spoke to my heart and just said, Jeremy, I want to get through to you during this. And it was just kind of changed my perspective. Instead of going, I want to get through this, God's just saying, I want to get through to you. And it really helped me kind of go, okay, Lord, what do you want to teach me during this time? Because obviously everything's different. Everything's changed. I'm not in control and it's confusing. So what do you want to teach me? And really kind of sent me on this trajectory of just going, okay, Lord, I realize that I need to trust you. That scriptures that we hear all the time, that sometimes they hit us deeper in certain moments. And I've heard Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 so many times. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding, which we all don't understand. But in all your ways, acknowledge me and I'll direct your path. And I think that it's all those things that you really have to dig in deep and say, okay, God, what are you teaching me? And so really the title track was just a starting of the scratching the surface of, not was a surfacey song, but scratching the surface of the whole thing that God was doing in my heart. And I think that because of that, there's a lot of depth in this record that I've been telling people the whole time, please listen to the album from start to finish, because you got to get a full understanding of all that God was doing, all that I was processing during this time. So, and then I think the cover, there's a pop to it because, that last album was kind of a desert scene because I was kind of going through, in a sense, a desert season. And I think that kind of actually continued on a little bit, towards this last season as well. And from out of that time, though, just kind of sprung this life and this joy and all these kind of things that God was doing in my heart. And I think that, the depiction of a lot of these songs and how colorful the albums or the album is, or how colorful the video is a depiction of stepping out of that desert season into new life.
That's awesome. So I'm interested to hear with you. So you've pre-released some of the tracks already, and some of the music. Are there any songs or lyrics within the songs that hit differently for you now from when you were first thinking about them and the state that you are in now, and then how you are now?
Well, I think looking back, because a lot of these songs were written, actually all these songs were written during the pandemic. So really, honestly, I can look back now and realize the emotions I was going through when I was writing. You know what I mean? So that would be more, I think, the explanation of now, because it was all written during the pandemic. And so I do look back and realize the emotion, but realize how through those emotions, God has kind of brought me through, and there's a song called Steady Me. I mean, there's lots of songs that I could talk about, but a song called Steady Me where it says, you never promised that I wouldn't feel pain, but you promised that you'd be right there you promised you'd be with me till the end. And so I think for me, I think that this whole conceptual kind of album was just going, I'm going to be very honest about how I'm feeling. Like, hey, I'm hurting, this hurts. The chorus says, even when the ground beneath my feet begins to shake, you set my feet, you steady me. Even when my heart seems like it's tossed among the waves, it won't skip a beat because you steady me. I look back and I saw him do that, and go, oh yeah, I remember just writing that and allowing him to take my heart and to steady my feet and to calm the anxiousness of my heart. And so I think that's more of kind of the conclusion of this record, just like looking back now, going, my word, I was writing this during that time, and look at how God has been so faithful.
That's interesting. So you did mention that you wrote most of it, if not all of it, during the pandemic. I assume that there was probably some logistical differences for you in doing that. Was there anything else that stood out to you differently about this project than some of your others in creating it?
Yeah, I mean, logistically, I mean, you had definitely sometimes writing over Zoom or, singing over, like I was in California at one point singing to someone in Tennessee and he was doing my vocal. That was kind of crazy. So yeah, there was logistically crazy things. But I think one of the things that I realized in this album was, I've always, since I started, been busy. So yeah, you have time off, but not a lot of time to process. I mean, you do. Like, I know God has given me songs during this time, 20 years doing this. But this past year and a half, I've had so much time to process and let God kind of dig in deep in my heart. And so I think that the difference in this record is that you're going to hear some really deep processing in the whole record. Once again, I'm going to say that again because I think that's key. And I was talking to somebody recently and I said, make sure you talk about that. Because I'm like, I want people to hear the whole record. Because I think a lot of times you may have a few songs that you feel like are like really just kind of dug in deep. But I think the whole record just has such deep meaning to it. Even if it sounds like a song that's a little more poppy, it all has something deep to it because it was the processing that God was doing in my heart during this time. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually, one of the questions I had here to ask you is if there was one track over others that you were, most interested or excited for some reason for people to hear. But it's sounding like it's the whole thing is a complete project for you. So
it is. That's the key right there. It's hard. What do you want people to listen to? I'm like, I don't know, because there's so many different varieties of emotions and things that I was learning and writing that someone's going to relate differently.
So do you see success or how you're defining success for this project a little bit differently than some of your previous ones because of that?
100%. I think that it actually kind of stemmed from, honestly, this whole movie not coming out the way I was praying that would come out. And then I'm explaining it real quick. We'll kind of answer that question. So, the whole idea of this movie was doing amazing, was being set up to the point where you're like, oh, this is amazing. Like, God, this can't fail because you've obviously opened doors. And then, of course, the pandemic came out, and I still believe was in the theaters for a weekend, and did really well, but it kind of got shut down. So one thing's my wife she encouraged me. She one day just goes, honey, I woke up today, and I kept thinking, God didn't break his promises. I'll kind of continue on this. So there's a reason why I'm saying all this. God didn't break his promises. And I said, okay, what do you mean? God never promised that, this movie was going to be in the movie theaters for a long time and it wasn't going to get shut down. Never promised that your tour wasn't going to get canceled at all, because my tour got canceled. Mm-hmm. Never promised that kind of stuff. But what he promised was that he was going to use all these things for his glory and his purposes. And then she dropped the mic because basically what else she's going to say. I'm like, all right, that's what else she said. And so our point in saying that is that you realize that the whole purpose behind the movie, behind this record, all of that has happened this past year and a half. The heart behind everything has been, God, you get the glory. You reach as many people as possible and go to the depths of their soul, and that people would fall more in love with you. And so in saying that, I feel like, you really step back and go, what is the goal of this record? And you really that's the goal of all your records, but you really go, I've seen how God has used the movie to where it didn't end up being this big box office thing because it got taken out of theaters, but God used it in a deeper way, I believe, because people were stuck at home going through this pandemic. So I think that it reached people in a deeper way. And I think the same thing with this album is that you realize, I just want this to go deeper. Whatever the kind of expanse is or the width of this, mm-hmm. Cool. Whatever happens there is fine. But this needs to go as deep as possible. And so that's really the heart behind it. And I feel like that my mindset, it continues to shift. I've grown over the years, and you have your battles, you have your distractions, but you kind of just sit back and your expectations are different, as you get older. And I think my expectations are different as I get older.
That's awesome. I also, in addition to all the new music coming out, did want to touch base on your nonprofit Speaking Louder and just get an update from you on all the work that you've been able to continue do throughout all of these changes that I'm sure have affected how you do the work too.
Yeah, we haven't been able to go. So speaking louder real quick, it's a nonprofit. We go overseas, and it's the goal is to provide just a whole encompassing, really, I don't know, outreach where you can go, and we do these outreaches where we actually have a concert. We give the gospel. We went to Uganda, 35,000 people showed up. 1,000 people responded to the gospel. Went to India, 16,000 people showed up. 4,000 people responded to the gospel. So that's kind of the crux of it, to get people to respond to the gospel. But we want to leave a lasting kind of imprint as we go to these places. So what that means is we also do helps projects. So in India, we built like 30 homes. We built wells and leper colonies. We fed families. So we haven't been able to go over there because of all this going on, but we have been able to provide. We have boots on the ground there that help these communities, and we're able to provide finances for them, which has been incredible in their needs. In Uganda, we built a medical facility, which has provided medicine and a facility for 50,000 people in this island in Entebbe that have not had a place to go. And so that's been incredible to see how people are giving and responding to that as well. So it's kind of like this whole encompassing outreach where it's like leave a lasting thing, but give the gospel at an actual event as well. So we've been able to still give, during this time. And that's been incredible to see people. India was hit really, really hard. And so we're continuing to give, continuing to build homes, give food to people that have been so desperately in need.
That's awesome. So we're coming to the end of our time, but I do have one more question that I want to ask you. This is the one we normally end with, and I like to caveat that your answer can be musical or non-musical, however you want to answer it. But what are you most expectant for in the remainder of 2021?
Oh, I like that. We're going on tour finally after a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I'm expecting for is a really sweet time of people being hungry for more of Jesus. And so I feel like that the nights are going to be really powerful. I feel like that we're ready for the Spirit to move and for people's hearts to be changed. And so that's what I'm expecting for, is for people's hearts to be changed.